What is up, all you Minties? This is the Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition. And as promised, here's another round of Retroviews. Today we're going to be focusing on the Final Crisis Omnibus from DC Comics. So, please stay tuned. Okay, so let's take a look at this huge omnibus. This is one of the biggest omnis, not just DC omnis, but one of the biggest omnis that has ever been released. This is a 10th anniversary edition. This one came out in 2018. And then for some reason, at the end of 2019, they released a non-10th anniversary edition. So it doesn't have that logo. The retail of the book is $150, but it is literally over 1,500 pages. I think it's the exact amount is 1,516 pages. And it's going to be interesting to see when Marvel does this, because Marvel is planning to do that with War of the Realms. I believe that's over 15. I think it's like 1,570 pages. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Now, one of the most important things, and actually let's showcase the book really quick. So as I crack this book open and talk a little bit about it, I want to say something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, but the printing of this book, the art that they use in this version is the exact same one from the Absolute edition. So what does that mean? Well, that means if you have the original trade paperback or the original hardcover, you know that J.G. Jones, when he was drawing this on a monthly basis, when he was drawing each series, that he got a little behind. So Doug Mahnke stepped in and started drawing some of the stuff. He was the guy that did the Superman miniseries, and his artwork is phenomenal. But he stepped in and started helping him with the monthly series. So J.G. Jones never got to finish the series. He didn't do all the artwork for the ongoing 7-issue miniseries. However, when the Absolute came out, they gave him a chance to finish those unfinished pages. So some of the artwork in this omnibus is different than, say, the trade paperback. Or the artwork in the Absolute is different than the trade paperback or hardcover collection. So that's something to keep in mind. Like I said, I don't hear a lot of people talk about that, but I wanted to point that out. Now, as far as this book is concerned, this is another crisis, right? This takes place after Infinite Crisis, after Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, is there any reading? This is a big question that I always get, because there's a lot of people that get confused when reading Final Crisis. And believe me, you're not alone. By the way, I'll talk about the binding on this particular book here in a little bit, and the build of it. You're not alone. I have read this event 4 times. And every time I read it, I get a little more out of it. The first time I read this event, as it was coming out monthly, I hated it. I don't know what was going on other than the tie-ins with Batman. It had nothing to do, like DC advertised. Here, let me show you. They had this weekly series going on. It was called Countdown, right? And then towards the end, I think they changed it to Countdown to Final Crisis. It was very much a follow-up to their successful 52 weekly series. So the events in here were supposed to lead up to this. Also, they had this little mini-series called The Death of the New Gods. This is the one by Jim Starlin, because who else is going to kill characters besides Jim Starlin? Come on, the guy's infamous for that. But anyway, they advertised that this was also going to lead into this. None of that is necessary to read this. As a matter of fact, that may even confuse you further. The only 2 things I can recommend before reading this that has helped me out, and really, I mean, it's no surprise, but of course, Grant Morrison's Batman, right? And Jack Kirby's Fourth World. And I just recently got this, I think, the middle of last month, and I've been reading a lot of the stories in here. And this is one that was suggested to me to read before reading this when I first complained about it. I used to have a podcast, and they were like, oh man, you just need to read Jack Kirby's Fourth World. I was like, okay. At the time, of course, there weren't that many trade paperbacks available or hardcovers. Luckily, we got an omnibus, and still, you all know me by now that my DC starts right after Crisis on Infinite Earths. If you have read this and are confused, you're not alone. I mean, I have been reading DC since 1986. Right? And I wasn't reading every title. I started with just Batman and then moved on to Superman and Wonder Woman. But it took me a few years to get into, and I thought I had a good understanding of the DC universe. So when I first read this, I was like, all right, I'm ready. But I guess I wasn't. Like I said, the more I have read this, and it is a deep read too, especially when you read his issues of Batman and of Final Crisis together and Superman. Like, it all makes sense. It's a huge love letter to a lot of the stuff that Jack Kirby did, now that I'm reading that, or a lot of the stuff just in the DC universe. So going into this, if this is your first DC book, I do not recommend it. If you've heard about it, you've heard how great it is from other people, or you want to have a taste of one of these crisis events, I strongly suggest not starting with Final Crisis. Yes, the art is phenomenal, and you will be sucked in because of that. There's Scott Collins. There's a lot of miniseries in here. So actually, let's talk about the content of this book, because it is a lot. I mean, we are talking over 1,500 pages. So the contents are, of course, it's double dipping with his Batman run. So it has Batman 676 to 683, 701 to 702. It's got the tie-in issues with Birds of Prey 118, DC Universe 0, where, honestly, DC Universe 0 is where everything begins, or should be read first, but I think they put Legion of Three Worlds in here first, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm sorry. It does kick off with DC Universe number 0. So the mapping on this is actually pretty damn accurate. It's got the Last Will and Testament number 1 of the DC Universe, Final Crisis, the main series 1 through 7. That's the ongoing series. And in between issues, that's where the miniseries take place, and that's the way that this is mapped. It's got the Legion of Three Worlds, the 5-issue miniseries, Requiem number 1, Final Crisis Resist, Revelations, that's the miniseries that I talked about, that Greg Rucka kept writing the story of Montoya in it. And if you saw my retro view of the Gotham Central, it's got one of my favorite stories, Rogue's Revenge. But see, even Rogue's Revenge is a little hard to follow if you haven't been reading Flash, because something happens in the pages of Flash that there needs to be a need for the Rogue's Revenge. It's got the Secret Files, Submit, which does a one-shot, Superman Beyond, which takes place between issues of Final Crisis. It's a 2-issue miniseries. Flash 240 and 241, Justice League 21, Superman Batman 76, Teen Titans 59 and 60, and the Terror Titans miniseries 1 through 6. So it's huge. Honestly, I don't even understand why they kept the Terror Titans in there, but whatever. So this is Grant Morrison's big event that he was leading up to with his beginnings in Batman. And when I mean event, it is a huge event. It is a huge apocalyptic type of event. Like, there are some really good heartfelt moments in here too. There's a moment that I remember screaming, "Hell yes!" because there were some returning characters. But that's what I meant when I said that I think prior knowledge to the DC Universe is almost recommended before reading this. I mean, for the example, this is the story that I was talking about. This is Revelations, right? And, I love the fact that they put the variants right after. I can't show the other page because it's the ending of another storyline, but right behind the original page. So the standard edition and then the variants in the back. So, for example, like this storyline right here, this is Revelations. If you're not reading all of DC for like the last 3 years, you're gonna be so damn lost. Like, who are these characters and why do I care about them? And I make it sound like it's all Grant Morrison that wrote this, but there's a ton of other creators in here. Of course, I mentioned Jeff Johns, Peter Tomasi, Sean McKeever, Tom Payer, Greg Rucka, just to name of some others. Oh, Brad Meltzer. After reading it 4 times, I realized, damn, it is actually pretty well executed what happens in these pages. What used to confuse me actually makes sense. The nonsense that I thought was going on after reading everything, after doing the last time I read this was when the Omnibus first came out. So 2 years ago, I did a huge readathon of a lot of the DC books that were recommended for reading this, before you read this. And if you were reading the DC Universe at the time, you would appreciate this so much more, and like just the epic proportions of it. It is a damn solid read, but I'm not gonna lie, it's not an easy read, as I mentioned several times. You have George Perez on artwork too, Doug Mankey, I've already mentioned J.G. Jones, Adam Kubert, Scott Collins, believe that's Philip Tan. Yeah. So there's a lot of talent that went into this book. Now that I've talked about it, I'm sure you're like, damn, I wasn't expecting a review of the book. How else am I supposed to talk about Final Crisis without talking about the complexity of it? And that's just one layer. If I were to do a thorough review of this book, I think it would take me 3 videos. Alright, so let's look at the back for extras. Surprise, there are no extras really. All the variants, like I mentioned, are within the book. It does have the anti-life equation according to Grant Morrison. And then part of the, I believe this is the Blood Bible. So this is the Greg Rucka stuff. Now, as far as the binding of the original one, I'm sure you can probably tell. I don't know about the non-10th anniversary edition, but as far as the 10th anniversary edition, it's not the greatest, right? It's a pretty damn big book. It's 1,500 pages. It's sewn binding, but you have all this glue down here that I'm sure you can crack a little bit with like the ruler trick. Well, I've talked about the ruler trick for a while now, and that's just sticking a thin, small ruler, please, really slow, gradually every day, through this eye hole. And it helps, but then some people are like, well, it's going to break your spine eventually. I don't know. I've done it a couple of times to some of my books. I haven't done it to this one. I don't know why, because, well, I guess I've only had one reread, and I figured, oh, well, maybe after the 3rd or 4th time I try to understand what's happening, it'll eventually lay better. As far as like laying down towards the middle, of course it lays down better. And of course, because of the excess glue down here, and because it's such a big book, you are going to have gutter loss. So expect that, right? And there are some pages that, they're not as bad as, say, The Flash that we've looked at when I've done an overview of it, but there is gutter loss, at least in this edition that I have. One of the other things I didn't point out was the Superman Beyond little 2 issues miniseries. They were in 3D. So the original printing of this came with 3D glasses, and I think this is just the standard edition printing of those 2 issues. So now, if you're interested in purchasing the most recent printing of this book, please check out our sponsor,
cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for brand new graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off the cover price. Cheap Graphic Novels prides itself on packaging your books so they arrive safely and in excellent condition, as well as prompt and helpful service. And check out their bargain bin for even greater deals up to 90% off cover price. And for you Minties, Cheap Graphic Novels is running a special promotion. If you're a first-time customer, let them know you were referred by Near Mint Condition at the checkout, and you'll receive a credit for free shipping on your next order. Now, this is only for U.S. customers. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discounts, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more.
Now, that was the contents of the book and the page count. Again, there was another reprint of this book, and that came out late last year. I don't know about the binding on that one, but this is the one that I have, the 10th anniversary. Let me know in the comments down below if you've ever read this. If you've read this and were confused, believe me, you are not alone. Or if you read it and it is your favorite crisis or your favorite event. I would love to know all those comments down below. Please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button if you have not subscribed yet. Ring that bell for notifications to let you know when our videos are going live. And speaking of live, tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, the amazing Amanda, Wonder Maddie, and myself are going to be doing a live episode talking about Mouse, one of the most important comic books that has ever been printed. We can be found on Redbubble and on Patreon, and those are great ways to support the channel if you can do so, and thank you so much to our existing patrons. More importantly, please everybody, don't forget to stay healthy, stay safe out there, and much love to all of you.